Let me ask you a direct question. Have you ever felt that your words don't carry the weight they should? Have you noticed that even when speaking important truths, people hear you but don't truly listen? I went through this. And I learned something most people will never tell you. The problem isn't your message. The problem is the foundation upon which you're building your communication. Many of you believe you just need better techniques, more sophisticated rhetoric, prettier words. That's the comfortable lie keeping you trapped in superficiality. The uncomfortable truth is this: real persuasive communication isn't learned in public speaking courses. It's forged through a brutal process of self-knowledge that most people don't have the courage to face. You want to influence people? Then stop trying to impress them and start building unshakable convictions within yourself. I didn't move crowds because I had a natural gift for speaking well. I transformed consciousness because I spent years examining every belief of mine under every possible light until I had certainties that prisons, threats, and bullets couldn't shake. And now I'm going to show you exactly how you can do the same. I won't give you magic formulas. I'll reveal the 5 elements of communication psychology that I and other globally respected Black voices mastered to transform not just what people think, but how they think. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to learn can completely change your relationship with your own voice. Conviction isn't built on the surface of everyday conversations. It's forged in deeper territory, where each belief undergoes relentless interrogation until it proves its legitimacy. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't wake up one day speaking about theological dignity with the authority we know. He studied, questioned, lived contradictions, faced his own doubts, and emerged from this process with certainties that no one could shake. Malcolm X didn't articulate Black self-determination because he read about it in some book. He went through profound transformations, revised entire beliefs, allowed experience to shape him until he arrived at principles he was willing to die for. Nelson Mandela refused conditional freedom not out of stubbornness, but because he tested his conviction against 27 years of pressure, and it remained intact. Angela Davis articulates abolitionism with a firmness that defies decades of persecution because her ideas survived every possible attack. What differentiates these voices from people who merely repeat nice opinions? The answer lies in the root. Authentic conviction doesn't come from agreeing with pleasant concepts. It's born from honest confrontation with oneself, from rigorous study that destroys illusions, from lived experience that separates theory from reality. You feel this energetic difference within seconds of conversation. Someone who lives principles carries a different presence than someone who collects catchphrases. True persuasive communication doesn't happen through elaborate techniques or calculated emotional manipulation. It emanates from a deeper source, the tested certainty of someone who examined their beliefs under every possible light and they remain standing. People perceive this authenticity before they even process your words. They sense whether you're speaking from genuine conviction or just performing a role you learned to play. King could move crowds because every word that came from him was anchored in something unshakable. It wasn't theatricality, it was lived truth. Mandela could negotiate with adversaries because his firmness didn't depend on external approval. He knew exactly where he could yield and where he would never yield, and this internal clarity translated into external communicational power. Real authority in communication never comes from impressive credentials or sophisticated vocabulary. It comes from that deep root where you know your own foundation so well that no one can destabilize you. You stop defending your ideas as if you needed to convince yourself and start sharing them as someone offering something solid they've already proven. This shift transforms everything. Your words gain weight, your presence gains density, your influence expands, not because you became more eloquent, but because you became more truthful. And the Black people who earned worldwide respect understood this before mastering any technique. First, forge your convictions in real fire. Then, speak from them. Forging deep convictions is the first step. The second requires even more refined discernment, knowing where to apply this force. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie doesn't waste energy trying to convince everyone about everything. She identifies with surgical precision the leverage points where a well-told story collapses entire structures of thought. Kwame Nkrumah didn't get lost in infinite debates about the details of Pan-Africanism. He went straight to the core of the matter and planted seeds that would grow for generations. Barack Obama navigated American racial complexity not by trying to win every political argument, but by choosing strategic battles where his voice could generate real transformation. This selectivity doesn't come from cowardice or lack of opinion, it comes from profound emotional maturity. Immaturity tries to win all discussions. Mastery recognizes that not every conversation deserves your energetic investment. Some battles strengthen your purpose. Others just disperse your force and feed your ego disguised as principle. The difference between these two categories determines whether you'll become a respected voice or just another person shouting into the void. Martin Luther King Jr. faced daily criticism from all sides. He could have spent each day responding to detractors, correcting distortions, defending himself against attacks. Instead, he quickly evaluated, can this conversation move hearts? Does this confrontation serve collective liberation or just my need to be right? He chose to ignore 90% of provocations to invest all his energy in the 10% that truly mattered. This brutal economy of attention allowed him to maintain focus on the moral pressure points that triggered cascading changes. Black people who achieved global respect needed to develop this precision because they didn't have the luxury of waste. Limited resources demand maximum efficiency. You learn to distinguish in seconds. Is this person genuinely open to reconsidering their positions or just seeking validation through conflict? Does this space allow real dialogue or just offer a stage for performances of moral superiority? Does this moment serve transformation or just entertainment? Developing this internal radar transforms your communication. You stop wearing yourself out in circular conversations that never lead anywhere. You start investing your energy where it can truly germinate. Your influence multiplies not because you speak more, but because you speak better, directing each word to the fertile grounds where real change can grow. Knowing where to apply pressure is fundamental. But true communicational power lies in how you apply that pressure. Maya Angelou didn't convince through meticulously constructed logical arguments. She reconstructed experiences of pain into literature that touched something universal in the human soul. James Baldwin didn't win political debates with data and statistics. He transformed personal experience into social diagnosis so precise that people saw their own contradictions reflected in his words. Toni Morrison didn't rewrite history through academic treatises. She used fiction to reveal deeper truths than any official document could capture. Nina Simone didn't change minds through manifestos. She converted suffering into music that healed wounds people didn't even know they carried. They all understood the same ancestral truth. Definitive persuasion doesn't happen at the level of logical thought. It happens in the territory of imagination. Logical arguments can be refuted with counter-arguments. Data can be contested with other data, but narratives install themselves in a different place in consciousness. They don't ask permission to enter. They don't wait for rational approval. They simply begin to inhabit the person, reorganizing how they see the world from the inside out. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't describe a better future as if he were presenting an architectural project. He painted this future with such vividness that people began to inhabit it mentally before manifesting it physically. This wasn't manipulation. It was the ancestral art of storytelling operating at its highest level. He chose each detail with precision, which images to evoke, which emotions to awaken, which memories to activate. Black and white children playing together wasn't just a beautiful scene. It was an alternative reality so concrete in the collective imagination that it began to exert gravitational force on external reality. You master true persuasive communication not by learning sophisticated rhetoric techniques. You master the art of telling stories that change how people think, not just what they think. A well-told story doesn't enter through the front door of consciousness asking to be analyzed. It infiltrates through the back window and starts rearranging the internal furniture before the person realizes what's happening. Days later, weeks later, the person discovers they're seeing the world differently and doesn't even remember exactly when the change began. The black voices that earned worldwide respect mastered this art because they had to. They didn't have access to traditional mechanisms of power. They didn't control the official narratives. They didn't own mass media. So they developed mastery in the only tool no one could confiscate, the ability to tell stories that transform consciousness from the inside out. Malcolm X carried the fire that ignited dormant consciousness. His communication had the intensity of someone who refused any compromise with the mediocrity of conformism. Martin Luther King Jr. had the wisdom that built bridges where others saw only insurmountable chasms. His capacity to dialogue without losing firmness transformed adversaries into allies. Nelson Mandela balanced both these powers, unbreakable firmness in convictions combined with strategic capacity for dialogue that built nations. Angela Davis combines to this day scalpel-sharp analysis with radical compassion that refuses to abandon anyone in the transformation process. The black voices that earned global respect didn't choose between passion and reason as if they were opposing forces. They integrated both in the proportions that each specific moment required. This dynamic balance reveals the fourth element of persuasive communication, emotional sophistication, the ability to calibrate your energy according to strategic necessity without losing integrity and principles. Knowing when your communication needs the heat that mobilizes people to action, and when it needs the clarity that educates minds toward understanding. Recognizing when to directly confront power structures and when to persuade indirectly through narratives that transform from within. This flexibility doesn't represent character inconsistency or lack of conviction. It demonstrates communicational mastery at the highest level. You develop multiple tonalities within your authentic register. You learn to be the cutting sword that exposes hypocrisy and the protective shield that defends dignity, depending on what the situation demands. You cultivate the capacity to adjust frequency, intensity, and approach while maintaining total coherence in core values while varying in expression tactics. Immaturity communicates always the same way, regardless of context. It confuses consistency with rigidity. It believes that changing tone means changing character, so it imprisons itself in a single mode of expression and calls it authenticity. Mastery understands that true authenticity has amplitude. You can be firm without being aggressive. You can be compassionate without being condescending. You can be rational without being cold. You can be passionate without being irrational. You can confront without destroying. You can persuade without manipulating. Developing this expanded emotional repertoire requires conscious work. You need to study how the great black voices adjusted their registers. King spoke differently to black congregations in the South and to white audiences in the North, but his central message remained intact. Malcolm X had a different tone in hostile interviews and conversations with black communities, but his principles never wavered. They mastered the art of adapting form without betraying essence. This sophistication transformed their voices into precise instruments that played exactly the notes necessary for each historical moment they faced. Each public appearance by Nelson Mandela after 27 years of prison carried a power that transcended his words. His simple existence became a living refutation of the attempt at silencing. Each book Angela Davis publishes, each lecture she offers, each analysis she articulates functions as irrefutable proof that decades of systematic persecution failed to fulfill their objective. Each speech Martin Luther King Jr. delivered before his assassination demonstrated an inconvenient truth for his oppressors. Death threats wouldn't shake his mission. The most persuasive communication from globally respected black people isn't just in the eloquent words they say, it's in the simple and powerful fact of their continuing to say them, their persistent existence, their categorical refusal to be erased. Their unshakable consistency over years and decades becomes the supreme argument that no logic can refute. Each time you see or hear them, the subliminal message resonates clearly. You tried to silence me and failed. You tried to break me and couldn't break me. You tried to erase me from history, and I'm still here, more present than ever, still speaking, still carrying my truth, still transforming consciousness. This fifth element of persuasive communication operates in a completely different dimension from conventional techniques: dignified persistence, the cumulative narrative of an entire lifetime refusing to diminish. It's not about a perfect speech that changed the world in an afternoon. It's about the aggregated message of decades maintaining firmness through adversities that would destroy less committed people. Each moment you communicate with clarity about who you are contributes to this construction. Each time you refuse to lower your head adds up to the larger story your life is telling. People perceive this temporal consistency viscerally. They recognize the difference between someone who had a brilliant idea yesterday and someone who has lived the same principles for decades, between who speaks beautifully in convenient moments and who maintains the same voice through persecution, prison, threats, boycotts, defamation. This persistence builds a moral authority that completely transcends academic credentials and institutional positions. It creates respect that no title can buy and no marketing campaign can manufacture. You completely master the psychology of persuasive communication only through this final integration, understanding that each day you communicate your authentic truth, each moment you refuse to negotiate your essence, each situation where you maintain firmness despite pressure contributes to a narrative much larger than any isolated word. Your entire life becomes the argument, your persistent existence becomes the proof, and no one can refute a life lived with this unshakable integrity over time. Now you know the 5 elements that separate voices that echo through generations from voices that disappear in the noise. Authentic conviction forged through brutal self-knowledge. Strategic economy of energy focusing only where you can generate real transformation. Mastery in the ancestral art of narratives that reorganize consciousness. Emotional sophistication to calibrate passion and reason as each moment requires. Dignified persistence that transforms your entire life into the most powerful argument you can present. But knowledge without application is just intellectual entertainment. So now I ask you, are you willing to do the hard work these people did? Do you have the courage to examine your own beliefs with the brutal honesty necessary to build real convictions? Can you distinguish between battles that strengthen your purpose and distractions that just feed your ego? Are you ready to develop the multiple communicational tonalities that mastery requires, or will you remain trapped in a single mode of expression? And the most important question, are you committed to the long-term persistence that builds true respect? Or do you just want quick results that disappear at the same speed they arrived? Because your journey of personal development and leadership doesn't end when this video ends. It only begins. Each day you choose whether you'll communicate from genuine conviction or just repeat borrowed opinions. Each moment you decide whether you'll apply your energy where you can transform or waste it in empty conflicts. If you're serious about developing persuasive communication that truly matters, subscribe to this channel and activate notifications, because I continue sharing the principles of personal development and leadership that globally respected Black people use to transform not just their own lives, but the consciousness of entire nations. The question isn't whether you can master this. The question is, will you do the work necessary to master it?